Welcome to Beware of Spoilers. I am Adam. I'm driving to work. Let's talk about the future of ... which is a documentary series on Netflix about the future of various things. And I think that for how do I feel about this? There's a little bit of a disconnect about how I feel about this, and how I wish I felt about it. Now, in terms of, quality of the documentary, it's pretty well done. It is the kind of thing that if you were watching it and it was not on Netflix, you could see this maybe on YouTube as a series, or you could see it on the Verge's website, which is the company that made it. Like, their website could host a video like this, a video series like this, and it wouldn't feel out of place. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but it's got journalistic standards of quality, is what I'm trying to say. Where it's the kind of thing where, we would hope it'd be up to a certain standard, and it does, in fact, hit that standard. On top of that, this documentary does also feature, This documentary does also feature, a lot of really cool ideas, and a lot of really cool, this could happen way in the future, and it's like, okay, I like that. Here's the thing, though. I have two problems with them positing these things will happen in the far future. Now, number one, I like anything that looks at the future and gives a positive outlook. Like, I'm tired of seeing negative outlooks on things. I'm tired of seeing things where it's like, and then everything will die, and we will all die, we will all be killed, if not in climate change, if from extremists, and if from, I don't need to see all of this, because it's like, alright, whatever, but this is kind of a positive, where it's like, this is us heading towards a utopian society, but I think what the thing does is, if it just didn't touch on the social and economic issues that hang out in all of these things, and are with all of these things. Oh, that motherfucker got in the wrong lane and held up traffic for everyone. If it just didn't address these things, you'd be like, okay, that's fine. I understand what you're going for here. This is just like, if everything is equal, and if we're all in a utopian society, and everything is perfect, and all of that, then yes, this is what could happen. But the show does delve into some of the social issues that will mire some of these things. Like, the one that stands out the most is the health one. Like the future of health, the future of your health. And it's all about, when we have the ability to modify organs and the ability to grow your own replacement heart and all of that, it's like, they talk about all of that, it's like, oh, that's really cool, and then it's like, but people say that this could, continue to contribute to income inequality, where the only people who can afford it are those who have a lot of money. And it's like, it's one of those things where it's like, it's the harsh bring back to reality on that front that does kind of throw a dampener on everything, but at the same time, it doesn't actually address it. It just kind of like, but we won't worry about that. And it's like, well, it is a valid concern. I just don't understand, that was one of the things that bugged me. And the other thing is, it's this continued lionization of tech industry moguls. Like, it's nothing new. It is nothing, it's nothing that when we do this, it's something where, all of a sudden we're doing the thing where it's like the technological innovators who have these massive companies are being lionized, where it's like, it's something that's happened both in real life and in pop culture for generations at this point. But like, I guess, what's it called? Like, I guess that what was I going for here? Like if you look at like Walt Disney, who had his, like the way we look at Walt Disney as like a pop culture icon, to attest to that. But the problem is, if we look at I don't think that this show continuing that trend without criticizing what impact they're having beyond their little sphere of influence is helpful. Especially in a world where, now I know this came out before, I think this came out in late June, and I just watched it now, but in a world that is, looking at the, what's it called, the stuff that came out about what Uber did, and what Uber was doing that was illegal, it does not make sense to me. I mean, and look, I understand that came out after, but, sitting here and being like, look at how great all the tech companies are. Isn't this fantastic? They're doing all this great stuff, and it's going to make all of our lives better. Isn't that great? How great is this? It's like, I get it. I get where you're going with this. I totally understand what the point of what you're trying to say is. I'm not trying to discourage that. More power to you. My problem is, if we're going to sit here and we're going to be like, look at how great all these tech companies are, look at what they're doing to help us out, like, just as often tech companies are trying to fuck you. And I do mention it a little bit. Like, again, that's another thing that's very briefly touched on, is the idea that when a tech company gives you something for free, you are not you are not a customer. You are the product. You are the thing being sold. You are the one who is giving your data, and it is being sold in a package to Google, to all kinds of advertising firms, so that way they can repackage your data and use it to sell things to you. And it's intrusions of privacy. So like, they use that for like the video gaming one when they talk about augmented reality, and how augmented reality games that could require you to map out your entire house will give the developers a full 3D scan of your house, and that may not be a good thing. Same goes for like what's it called? For like they're talking about what was it, like earplug? No, it wasn't in the ear. It wasn't in the headphones episode. It was in a different episode. But they're talking about how much more hyper-targeted ads could be. They're picking up on your mood and all of that, on top of just the same things that have been targeted for years. But it is an interesting thing to look at, and it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, there are a lot of drawbacks to a lot of this, but I don't think there is necessarily like, that's the problem, is that inherently all of these things being done, you have to assume it's going to be done in a way that's going to maximize the profit whoever's making it, and that's just how the world works. Like, we are, that is what, capitalism is. It is a design by which to make a lot of money for the person who makes a thing, which is fine and all that. I totally get that. But at the same time, what we're looking at with the tech industry is a group of people who are taking advantage of the fact that government moves notoriously slow to get in, make a lot of money, and then hope that government doesn't catch up to them for a little bit, as we saw with the Uber papers that just came out and all of those Uber leaked documents. Where it's like, look, if all of these documents have been leaked to if the press got their hands on all these documents showing that Uber not only knew what they were doing was illegal, actively partook in it just to get it legalized, it is kind of, at minimum legally dubious. And look, if you're driving an 18-wheeler, you should not be going across 4 lanes of traffic. Now, where was I? I just onto the highway. I had to pause while we were going through the area that's being ripped up so that way they can redo it. Hopefully this doesn't mean they're going to get to a point where they're just going to rip the whole fucking thing up and hope for the best. That would suck. It just doesn't make sense to me. Why would you rip up part of it and then leave the rest kind of fucky? And then, not kind of immediately do what you just ripped up? Because, look, people kick up rocks the entire fucking way up and down that stretch, and it's okay, well, cool, you're kicking up rocks, but you're hitting, my car got hit with no less than 4 pebbles on the windshield, and it's look, one of those is going to crack the windshield at some point. So how can we address that problem before it gets worse? But no. Where was I? But yeah, I think that's part of the problem that the show doesn't really address, is this idea that tech companies inherently are not in it for, the fact that there's a company involved shows that they're not in for the altruistic way of doing it. Where it's look, we still have these problems of, the company's going to use this to their advantage, and they're going to use it in ways that may not be ethical or moral or anything in that regard. But what does that mean for, the average person? It's well, and that's the thing too, it's at one point they posit the question, would we be willing to give up some privacy for convenience? And I'm yeah, fuck, have the last 30 years, 20 years, 30 years not proven that? Why is that a hypothetical question? We know the answer. We've seen it. That's why Facebook has run our lives for so long. It's the ability to seamlessly communicate with one another across vast spaces and share our thoughts with anyone who wants to hear them has made it where we're willing to give up our privacy to do it. And look, I'm not saying that, for one thing or the other, because it's I'm sitting here recording a podcast, but to say would we give that up? It's yeah. What do you mean, would we? We did, in spades. We've done it for almost 30 years now. We have willingly given up privacy, and we've just been okay with it. Because it's it makes things easier. Signing into multiple websites all with one login makes things easier. And it's a convenience factor of about 7 seconds, if that. But that is an example of we gave up that, and now this one company knows everything we sign into. Even if it's not just the password, they know everything we sign into. And it's I understand. I understand that it's you want to posit a question rather than give a conclusion. But look, you can't just say well, would this happen when there is empirical evidence to indicate that it would. A substantial amount of empirical evidence. We basically have the largest case study in the history of the planet. That shows off that, yeah, this is exactly what we would do. I don't know. It feels kind of, what's the word I'm looking for here? Silly. But I think that the most use that this show could have is more for science fiction writers than for anything else. Because, futurology is kind of something that is very nebulous and hard to pin down. And the idea that we're going to look at something and be like, well, where is this going to go 10, 15, 20 years in the future? Unless you're going to take the Frank Herbert approach and you're going to, take things and remove them from, okay, so one of the things that Dune does very well is it removes computers from the equation by saying the machines had an uprising, we put them down, and now there's a ban on artificial intelligence. Boom, problem solved. You don't have to worry about being aged out of, being aged out of computers being used widely, or the technology for computers changing so vastly that this book seems dated. In the same way that if you look at old Star Trek episodes, it seems dated because the foresight did not get to where we are now. There are some things that look, similar, but not everything does. And I think that that's the kind of thing that the show kind of doesn't really do. Unless you want to take that approach, it shows a good opportunity to be like, okay, so here are some of the cool things that could happen in the future. Maybe incorporate them into your writing. Like the whole idea of, the skyscrapers being made of organic living matter is a really cool idea. And the skyscrapers that are community centers is a really cool idea as well. I am all in on board with those ideas, and I think that, if I do another science fiction, maybe those ideas will be incorporated. But the idea that, and a lot of the ideas aren't exactly new either, to say the least. Because, if you look at, the episode about health opens with the mirror that looks at you and tells you what's wrong with you. I remember reading, 10, 15 years ago almost, a book by Dr. Michio Kaku, Physics of the Future, or Physics of the Impossible, or one of those two. I read both of them. But him talking about in the future, that will be something that could exist, and it'll be able to look inside your body and tell what's wrong with you. And then also the other thing was, when they're talking about maybe I'm just stupid, which is entirely a possibility, but when they're creating new organs from your own matter, and it's and we can make it Wi-Fi connected, so that way you can, or Bluetooth connected, so it'll connect to your devices, and it's okay, if the problem is rejection that you're trying to avoid, why wouldn't that cause the same issue? And if that's the case, how is it not cheaper to just make it in a way that is not, that is not, how is it not cheaper to just build an artificial heart that way instead of building out of living materials? But whatever. I'm on day 2 of a headache right now. I don't know if you can tell. I'm a little subdued today because it's a splitting headache now for the second day in a row. And I'm tired. I didn't sleep well last night. It's also been a home situation. So yeah. I think we'll wrap up there for today. I think we've covered a good amount of ground. It is one of those things where it's an interesting kind of thought exercise about how far can we take current systems and move them into the future, to show the future of. But I think that if it's something where it's all right, I'm going to put down a down payment on my Keurig-style synthetic meat creator, and I think it'll be sitting there waiting for it for a lot longer than it indicates here. Because that's the thing, too, is that when we look at these, these things that are happening, it's not that I don't trust synthetic meat, it's that I don't trust whatever chemical they're making the synthetic meat in to not give us cancer. And again, another example of tech companies moving faster than government can react. So we probably won't know about the safety of that for a while. But we'll wrap it there for today, and we will be back with more news and more reviews as they happen. So until then,